Is coming in right now. We told you first, and it is official. Reliance Communications will sell its wireless assets to Reliance Jio. We have Kritika Saxena with us. Kritika, news that we had reported.
Yes, we had, in fact, we were the first to actually get Puneet Garg to confirm this on camera. Let me clarify this, and we have Rajan Matthew with us. Rajan, we've been talking about this story for a very long time. Reliance Communication possibly selling parts of their wireless business, tower business for a very long time now, and it's finally happened. Let me quickly take you through the points that have come out today. So what the announcement is that Reliance Jio has acquired specified assets of RCom and its affiliate. So as we have been reporting, an asset monetization process for RCom assets was mandated by the lenders of RCom, who appointed SBI Cap. The process is supervised by an independent group. Consequent to the agreement, Reliance Jio or its nominees will acquire assets under 4 categories. Now, this is the important point. 1, towers. 2, optic fiber cable network. This is very important because this was one asset that many players were vying for. Spectrum and media convergence nodes. That is the MCN network, which was also on the block. Again, over here as well, if I'm correct, Airtel, Vodafone had also put in. So remember, all 3 players, Bharti Airtel, Vodafone and Reliance Jio, even Idea Cellular in some areas, were looking at all of these assets. Now, to go into the details, these assets are strategic in nature and are expected to contribute significantly to the large-scale rollout of wireless and fiber to home and enterprise services by Jio. The acquisition is subject to receipt of requisite approvals from the government, and yes, the parties are bound by confidentiality, so we don't know the exact valuation, etc.
There is also a press release from Reliance Communications to the exchange, and there they have pointed out very clearly the assets that are being sold. 122.4 megahertz of 4G spectrum in 800, 900, 1800, 2100 megahertz bands, over 43,000 towers, 1.78 lakh RKM of fiber with pan-India footprint, and 248 MCNs that you call.
So that's the entire fiber network in MCN and tower assets. Now in spectrum, just to clarify here, it's the 4G spectrum. So the rest of the, and this is basically the 850 megahertz. Now they have spectrum across bands. They have spectrum across 5 key bands. So in 850 megahertz is what the 4G spectrum essentially is what Jio has bought, and that's the most relevant. Over here as well, Rajan, I think you would also know this, that Airtel and Jio were neck to neck in buying that 4G, but yes, Jio has emerged the front runner. Rajan, your first thoughts?
So very clearly, in line with what the consolidation scenario of the industry has been heading towards, again, RCom has significant assets, and it's a good thing that it was bid out in a very transparent manner. And I think the bidding shows that, one, the remaining players are very keen and are now strategic in nature in terms of going forward. So I think the emerging landscape of the 3 dominant players, which is Jio, Airtel, Voda, Idea combined going forward, is going to be the landscape of the operator community going forward. And I think this asset distribution shows that, one, these now require deep pockets. 2, secondly, that the government must now look at what this emerging scenario means for the industry in terms of looking at the financial stress in the industry. And finally, very clearly, 4G is going to be the dominant technology going forward. And so I think all operators will now focus. And the final point is that
go ahead. Rajan, talking specifically about 4G, they have taken the entire 4G bandwidth that RCom has had. 122.4 megahertz of 4G spectrum will entirely go to Jio. What is left then? I mean, majority goes to Jio, right? And how much of a setback is it to Airtel?
So I see increasingly all spectrum bands are now being used for 4G. The thing is that, yes, in the 800 band, you have very valuable spectrum because of its propagation characteristics, but the bandwidth is limited in the 800. Whereas as you go higher, the compensating factor is that you get, anywhere from 10 to 20 megahertz of contiguous spectrum. So there are offsetting factors. So it's not a critical determinant. It's an important dimension. But increasingly, as I said, all bands, 800, 900, 1800, 21,
Exactly, yeah.
all
So that's
utilized for 4G.
For 4G, and that's the entire portfolio that Rel Jio has taken, 122.4 megahertz of 4G spectrum across their bands. So 800, 900, 1800, 2100 megahertz bands is what has been taken. Earlier it was expected that perhaps they may take part of it and the rest would go to Airtel. Rajan, what about the 3G portfolio that RCom has? Do you expect Jio to perhaps at a later date take that, or do you think Airtel or Vodafone or Idea would stand out over here? And does 3G really make sense right now?
Yeah, so 3G spectrum specifically is yesterday's story. As I said, nobody is really investing in 3G as a technology. They are repurposing the spectrum bands that were previously used. So one will have to wait for the ecosystem around those spectrum bands to develop where 4G becomes viable on those spectrum bands. So there may be a time period, as you suggest, where operators will wait till the ecosystem, that is the network equipment and the handset configurations, coalesce around that band. So the other bands will be the more valuable ones right now.
So Matthew, this would cost about 25,000 crores. That was the number that the company revealed yesterday. You think legit price?
The valuations obviously depend upon who has ultimate control. I think one also has to determine what the clearance mechanisms is. There are band limitations overall, so one will have to see how those all normalize given the limitations on how much bandwidth holdings any one operator. So at the end of the day, the market will of course factor in 25,000 appears to be, it's an arm's length transaction.
And again, 25,000 was the entire spectrum portfolio.
Yeah, you think it's an arm's length price?
Yeah, I mean, it was bid for and I think it's perhaps an emerging benchmark outside of the auction process, where people are saying, okay, on an arm's length transaction, what is the value of this spectrum band? So, this is also some indicator to the TRAI and to the DOT as well, saying, look, what does this mean for overall valuations of spectrum coming forth in the future as well?
Okay. Rajan, what do you make of the tower sale? 43,000 towers, entire tower portfolio has gone. We don't know the valuation yet, but where does that put them if you look at Bharti Airtel's Infratel portfolio, their entire tower portfolio? Again, I'm just comparing the two equals right now.
So clearly, I personally think that post this acquisition by Jio of the towers, they will want to obviously monetize the value, and that comes from increased sharing of towers. This is one tendency that we've seen even from Jio. They are more than willing to put that into a shared portfolio. And so I think one should expect going forward that this will become part and parcel of some type of an arrangement with an IP1 type of an entity in order to maximize the value of those shares. Obviously, the more towers you have in a portfolio, the greater the value of that company. Yeah. So I think we will begin to see that going forward. I think this is just the first step in that overall direction.
Rajan, I request you to hold the line. We also have Mr. R.K. Upadhyay, former CMD of BSNL, joining in. Mr. Upadhyay, your first thoughts, Jio taking the entire tower portfolio, 4G spectrum, does this give them a leg up against Bharti Airtel Vodafone?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, let me tell you that this move was expected for long.
Yeah.
So it's not totally unexpected, and it's a move in the right direction. RCom, in any case, was unable to run the services. So in any case, they have announced closure of their voice services and all. Yeah. So infrastructure being taken was to be taken over by some company, and RJio was the most expected, buyer. So they have taken it, and their position will certainly be strengthened by acquiring this portfolio.
Okay, Mr. Upadhyay, and I'll ask Rajan also to comment on this. What I want to understand is the fiber network was something that was bid for very aggressively this time around that RCom has. They have 178,000 of optic fiber, pan-India. Yeah. With Jio acquiring this, what kind of an edge do they get over here? And even the MCN, for that matter, even that was bid very heavily.
Which one?
The MCN network, sir.
Yeah. So, see, with high-speed wireless services being offered to the customers now, the backhaul will have to be predominantly on fiber. Yeah. So the companies which are having fiber backhaul will be in an advantageous position, right? So in any case, I mean, either Jio would have laid its own fiber, which in today's world doesn't make much sense because a lot of fiber is already buried under the ground. So if they have acquired Arcom's 1 lakh plus kilometer fiber, this will definitely further strengthen their position. And it will facilitate expansion of the network also.
Okay.
Rajan, if you look...
Yeah, I just want to ask Ms. Rajan Matthews, does this strengthen Jio as a player, already a strong player with deep pockets? Will this purchase strengthen Jio further?
So I think, it certainly gives them additional assets with which to play, but I'm not sure that that is going to make it any more dominant than it already is. So the fiber that it is acquired is in a sense to catch up. Remember, they are the new entrant and they have had to lay fiber on their own. And this augments that. Already the existing operators have substantial fiber assets. So again, their interest was to see if they could augment. So I think it continues to keep everybody almost on a level playing field. Also, one has to remember that BharatNet is also rolling out fiber. There are other companies like Sterlite that are also very keen to begin to start putting fiber in the ground. And clearly, if 5G and cloud computing are the opportunities on the horizon, operators are getting ready with the back-end infrastructure to make sure that they can play adequately in this emerging scenario, because I think that's where the profit opportunities are going ahead.
Okay, and with this deal done, does it make it, can we hope that a deal will get done for Aircel as well? That's the other weak player who may be looking for a buyer.
So very clearly, yes, Aircel has very, very significant assets that would be of value to the other member operators, especially in circles. I think now what you will see is not a pan-India type of an approach, but a circle-by-circle approach where certain operators have significant assets, resources, and market position. So Aircel is very, very strong in Tamil Nadu, for example. So, operators will look to cherry-pick these types of assets to augment what they already have in their portfolio. It's not going to be a mass take everything type deal. So I think we'll see more of this with regard to Aircel. Already you've seen the 4G spectrum assets stripped off. So perhaps if Aircel wants to monetize other assets, they will look at those types of assets, like as you indicated, the fiber.
Rajan, just a technical question, just trying to understand, if you look at the comparables right now, Bharti already has its own fiber network, but this would have strengthened it. So does this in any way give Jio a leg up over here?
I don't know that it gives a leg up. It really depends upon the customer experience at the end of the day. So what happens presently is that fiber is probably more necessary in the urban areas where we see very high demand for data usage. We don't see the same ubiquitous usage perhaps as you go to the key cities and the rural areas. So I think what you're seeing in this is Jio getting ready for kind of a pan-India where the backbone is necessary, where the long-haul aspects of fiber, these are kind of the areas where Arcom has the assets. I don't believe the fiber assets are too much put in the urban areas. It's very tough to get ROW clearance. So this is kind of an augmentation in terms of a pan-India play to move traffic around at high speed and at these quantums that Jio is experiencing. So I think this is more the scenario that you are seeing, the urban infrastructure augmentation in the streets in our urban cities. That's going to be harder and a little longer term play.
Mr. Matthew and Mr. Upadhyay, just hold on. We also have Mr. R. Chandrasekhar joining in. Mr. Chandrasekhar, we'll request you to wear your former DOT Secchi hat. This is one of the most competitive deals that have been announced. Reliance Jio has acquired assets across 4 areas. I want your comments on the 4G spectrum and where this places Jio ahead of its competitors after taking the entire 122.4 megahertz of spectrum, of 4G spectrum that it has bought.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I haven't heard what the other speakers had said, but I think that, this is part of the whole ongoing consolidation and each player trying to have a presence across all the service areas, both in a geographic sense as well as in terms of the kind of services that are offered. And obviously, given that there are some players who are keen to exit or are looking for buyers, and there are some who are keen to continue and expand but have gaps in their portfolios. This point, of looking at each of these potential targets and seeing what is the complementarity is something which will be, I think, which is a natural process. And I just heard Rajan say that it's a little more targeted in terms of even specific areas. So I think that, this is a part of the whole consolidation process that we are seeing.
Mr. Chandrasekhar, do you think now rationality will return to pricing?
Well, as far as pricing is concerned, it's a function of many things. Number one, of course, obviously rationality is somewhere there as one of the factors. But there is a question of the competitive pressures and the competitive strategies that different players are adopting, number one. Number two is the fact that pricing also depends on what exactly is the business model that you have. And I think it would be a little simplistic to assume that all the players have the same business model, all the players have the same combination of technology and cost parameters. Cost parameters may also vary. And the revenue streams may also be somewhat different. And therefore, the price pressures will play out differently. Secondly, new incumbent always tends to be a little more aggressive because they have to actually grab market share. And one of the considerations in India, where you already have almost 1 billion mobile phones, is that any new player cannot grow by expanding into the market. They have to grow by taking the market from somebody. So all of these are factors, I think, that will play out.
Okay, Mr. Chandrasekhar, I wanted a comment from Rajan Matthew also on this issue. Your take, Mr. Matthew, more rational pricing you expect?
Again, a bifurcated or a trifurcated approach. I think, unfortunately, data has become a commodity, much like voice. So I don't see a whole lot of upside in terms of trying to differentiate your offering, except on price and volumes. The new trend in terms of differentiation will be focusing on the new opportunities, which I said was IoT, machine-to-machine, cloud computing, looking at the enterprise, small to medium, and looking to see where you can gain these opportunities. Again, content delivery on the networks will be another big thing. Speed will become another big thing as we start looking to consumers to basically tell you what's going to succeed or fail in the marketplace. So customer experience is going to be critical as we move forward. So the mere selling of bits and bytes, unfortunately, is just going to be volume game with low margins.
For the moment, we are enjoying the smaller bills, sir. I must confess.
But Rajan, how long do you think this will last? Because the fact is that, 2017 was all about one player trying to eat into the other market share. There was aggression, there was pricing. How long will this last? 2018 is upon us. Another 2 years, 3 years?
Unfortunately, this is going to be the new normal, so let's not try and
new normal.
The sunset horizon.
We like it. We like it.
They're going to have to adjust their business plans accordingly. I think it's a bit of a pipe dream to think that this is going to dramatically change. I think one is going to have to look at the new opportunities going forward.
Okay, Rajan, I want to ask this question to all three of you, actually. I'm trying to understand the entire 4G portfolio now. It's very obvious that it's Airtel and Jio neck to neck. Will this acquisition bridge the gap between Airtel, Jio and the other two players, Vodafone and Idea? First to you, Rajan.
So clearly, we're going to have to wait because the caps on 35% market share, the DOT finally approves this in terms of the overall holding on spectrum. Again, as I said, their bigger challenge at this point is to get the deal done and to start making sure that they can combine the spectrum holdings that each one of them has. As you rightly observe in networks, 2 plus 2 does not always equal 4. It's 6 or 7 because of network efficiency. So I think that's where their approach to the market will start gaining traction once this acquisition and joint approach goes forward. So I think we should wait for another 3 months to see how these folks emerge.
Do you think, Rajan, that do you expect Vodafone Idea to twist the game once the merger goes through?
I think there'll be a key dominant player as opposed to just being a big player. I think they have substantial assets, by the way. I mean, when you look at this, they have substantial market power. Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for the other two to think that Voda Idea is just going to lay back. So I think we'll see a very aggressive play in the marketplace once the merger is completed and going to market from this company, Idea Voda Combine.
Okay, we also have Mahesh Uppal joining in with the conversation. Mr. Uppal, your first thoughts, what does this mean for the entire pecking order of the industry? Where does this place Jio in competition to its peers with the acquisition of the entire 4G spectrum of RCom and several assets, including towers, including fiber and the entire MCN network?
Excuse me. Well, there's no doubt that the assets that RCom had are extremely valuable, particularly to Jio, which, as you know, has been involved in a different avatar in the creation of many of those assets. I mean, till 2005, Mukesh Ambani himself was running that company.
Yeah.
So it is. These are assets which are valuable as it is. Plus, the fact that if there is somebody who knows them best, it is in fact Mr. Mukesh Ambani. So I think this is good. And as Rajan pointed out, I think there is, when you try and combine assets of this kind, you it's not simply additive, but sometimes even multiplicative. Because, you do actually manage to make up for any kind of deficiencies in your network. You also manage to, whether it is spectrum holdings, whether it is physical assets like towers, etc. When you're combining with another player, you are in a position to actually deal with vulnerabilities that you might already be struggling with. So it's a good thing, and I think Jio is probably is the best place to make the best use of those.
Let me ask Mr. Upadhyay that. He's been tracking this space around the time when Mukesh Ambani was into communications at that particular point in time. Mr. Upadhyay, do you agree that Mr. Mukesh Ambani and Reliance Jio at this point in time versus their competitors are best placed to handle the entire 4G network that RCom has?
Certainly, Mr. Uppal has described it very aptly. I mean, no better explanation can be offered to the solution. All in all, I agree fully with him that if any company today was in best position to utilize RCom assets, it was RJio, and they have acquired it. Their position is definitely going to be strengthened. In many things, like vulnerabilities in the network will be dealt with. There will be certain repetitiveness, which might be desirable at some dominated may not be desirable, but then one has to take a holistic picture. So all in all, RJio is in the best position to utilize these assets to the best advantage of themselves.
Okay, we also have Mr. H.P. Ranina joining in in the conversation. Mr. Ranina, interesting day. The older Ambani has bought assets from the younger Ambani. Your first thoughts, sir, and how significant is this in the entire telecom landscape when you're talking about the consolidation?
Well, obviously, Mukesh through Reliance Jio is going to dominate the telecom sector. And that is his whole intention of acquiring this particular thing from Anil Ambani Group. Possibly he'll also acquire from other companies as well in due course. Secondly, some of these companies are now facing financial problems. So it is a good opportunity for them to get rid of those assets, to liquidate their debts and become stronger, maybe go into some other field. So I think Anil Ambani has made a good move, a tactical move, and it also benefits Reliance Jio. So it's a win-win situation for both the brothers.
Let me take that point to Rajan. Rajan, do you agree that there are more assets that Jio can acquire right now?
Again, the question that really comes to the fore is what type of assets. Clearly, the spectrum
but there isn't
assets,
anything left, right? I mean, what's left? There's an SL,
exactly.
right?
I don't, exactly. I mean, most of the subscribers, probably have voted out or been told to do so by Tribe. But let me just make one point at this case. I said, this is one instance when the government got it right. I think very early on, none of this would have been able to take place if spectrum trading and spectrum sharing and some of the adjustments to M&A had not happened by the government. I think the government, this is the old saying, stitch in time saves nine. These types of issues having been addressed in time beforehand allows this type of consolidation and this acquisition of assets, the 3G type of, the intra-circle roaming type of issues that were permitted. All of these, I think, really have set the stage for ease of doing business going forward and allowing these mergers and acquisitions to take place and allowing operators to exit the industry without taking a bloodbath in terms of value. And before, you had to leave everything on the table, forfeit things to the DOT and then just sort of walk away empty-handed. So I think this is a good thing that we ought to recognize in terms of government policy and action going forward.
Okay, let's get final comments from all our panelists. R. Chandrasekhar, coming to you first. Do you agree with Rajan's point that this is something that government had paved the way for? And to an extent, this is the end of the consolidation wave, the large consolidation wave in telecom.
Yes, I think there is also a different angle which has to be kept in mind that, there is one view if you look at the rear view mirror and see what the value of all these assets is and what the drivers are. But there is also the question of the future, and the future is really in the data, and the rate of consumption of data has been going up at a tremendous pace. And going forward, therefore, it's not just a question of pricing, but also how quickly consumption can be driven, how quickly you can attract customers who are consuming data, and how quickly you can adopt newer technologies like 4G and 5G, which will enable you to deliver greater throughput at a lower cost. So I think it has to be seen from that context, and in that context, the sort of older assets, it doesn't make sense to invest to create them. It's much easier and better and more efficient to buy them, and that's what I think we are seeing.
And consumer, of course, is a king there. Mr. Ranina, what do you expect? More competition now? More aggression now?
No, I think, as I said, the dominating position of Reliance Jio is now on the anvil. And, of course, where the consumer stands to gain, I don't know. Maybe initially they will, but later on, if there's a monopoly or if there is too much of power in the hands of one player, then that can be a problem for consumers. But at the moment, yes, it will be good for the consumers. And as I said, consolidation is now on their wane, and now things will not heat up as much as they have done in the past. So most of the work is behind us now, the consolidation part.
Okay, Rajan, two-line answer. Do you also agree that this gives Reliance a dominating position, or is this a level playing field?
I think it's more towards a level playing field because everybody is going to be quite aggressive in the marketplace, and clearly all the three remaining players are well positioned at this time going forward. So I think it's an even horse race at this point.
Okay, and Mr. Upadhyay, do you expect Vodafone Idea to spring some fireworks? Any aggression that you see from there?
No, nobody will leave any stone unturned,
Exactly.
One should not really discount Idea Vodafone combined. They are a very strong player. They also have equally valuable assets on the ground and a good, efficient operation system. So therefore, I don't think there is anything to fear. Consumers are to fear anything in the near future. But your question was more about, these policies that government set out, which facilitated this consolidation in a very smooth manner, I will say. So due credit has to be given to those proactive policies by the government, which has facilitated consolidation so far. It has gone in a nice manner without much of disruption in the process of consolidation.
Okay, we also have Milind Deora joining into the conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Deora, for joining in. Mr. Upadhyay was making a point that the government has set the stage for consolidation, set the stage for policies. Do you agree?
Well, I think, the telecom sector has been going through a difficult patch for a while now. And I also know this during UPA years when I had the opportunity to serve in the Ministry of Communications and IT. And there have obviously been many factors that can contribute to that have contributed to the sort of ill health of the sector. not to make it political, but one of them was also the manner in which, there was a shrill environment that was created, which led to cancellation of licenses, which led to a very hostile regime, which led to a change of how spectrum was allocated in the absence of any debate in Parliament, in the Cabinet, purely by a Supreme Court order. And all of those things caused some uncertainty to the sector. And that, coupled with a lot of debt that telcos already had, made it extremely competitive. And then, of course, Jio's entry was disruptive in that sense and only exacerbated the price war. So net of net, I think the telecom sector, if I look at it, has obviously been great for the consumer. It's been great for the country. It's been great for our economy, for our productivity over the last decade or so. And now it's a time for us to move into a more mature and evolved market, as we see in many other parts of the world.
So Milind, keeping this...
Where you'll have maybe 4 or 5 large operators, and there's bound to be consolidation. So that's a healthy sign.
So keeping this acquisition in mind, Milind, where you've seen Reliance Jio acquire the entire 4G business of Arcom, something that all players were vying for, the entire tower portfolio, the entire fiber network, the MCN network, how do you see consolidation now? Most of the assets are sold. Where do you see the pecking order right now as things stand?
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on that as a policymaker and perhaps someone who knows some of the promoters very well. But certainly I believe, based on my understanding of the telecom sector, and if I study and if I look at models overseas that we've had the opportunity to study, there's a strong case to be made if you talk to investors, to analysts, to telecom experts, that there's still tremendous growth in India's telecom sector. There's still tremendous opportunities in India's telecommunication sector. But there's only room for 4 or 5 large telcos.
Yeah.
And so consolidation was but natural. And I think today is obviously a step in that direction. And that was obviously, again, perhaps driven by Arcom's issue with having to pay its creditors and to restructure.
Yeah.
But I believe that going forward, you're going to see many more acquisitions and deals like this. In today's case, it might not be an all-out share purchase. It might be buying spectrum, buying the tower business, buying other assets. But with the likes of what you saw with Idea and Vodafone,
exactly,
I think you'll see a lot more consolidation happening in that sector, where there's actual mergers and acquisitions and not just asset sales.
So you think that, so if you look at the pecking order right now, there's a Bharti Airtel, there's Jio, there's Vodafone Idea that have already merged, and
no,
there's
and I
Arcom,
would even say that, as a former minister, I mean, the government needs to have a very serious rethink even on BSNL MTNL. And that's
do you think there is a case for a further consolidation of the public sector?
Well, I personally believe that, I mean, this is my personal belief that the government cannot compete in a sector like telecommunications, especially in a B2C sector, which is now so competitive. And BSNL, MTNL have upgraded their wireless technologies considerably, but ultimately they still have the legacy system of a wireline business. And that's a very attractive business for anyone to acquire that. They'll have a massive fixed line network all over the country.
Yeah.
But in a pure B2C play, it's very hard to provide them with the kind of customer service, with the kind of market innovations that the private sector has.
So you would say that is necessary for it to remain competitive. The merger of these is necessary to remain competitive in the industry.
Well, I certainly think that there is a strong case to be made where BSNL, MTNL can easily get a buyer and have a very attractive proposition. And of course, there are other technical issues which even we were looking at during our term, and that this government should obviously be considerate about. For example, when Air India and Indian Airlines merged, there were a lot of issues with shareholding, with employees, with wages, with remunerations. And those are issues which can be thrashed out with BSNL, MTNL also, because BSNL, don't forget, is 100% owned by the government of India, but MTNL is a publicly listed company. So those are, I think, technical and minor issues that can be resolved. But certainly there is room for the state-owned PSUs to also become a player in that consolidation process in India.
Since you brought that point, Milind, do you now think last 4 years telecom sector is something that no one wanted to invest in? We spoke to foreign investors. It would be about consolidation within the industry, yes, but you won't see foreign investor appetite. Do you think that the telecom sector is at least now, yes, there is still the issue of debt, which I'll take up in a bit, but I want to understand from you, do you think that the worst is over for the telecom sector and now we're moving forward?
Look, I think the reason foreign investors weren't keen on the Indian telecommunication sector for a long time, and that's a fair statement, in spite of us having one of the most liberalized sectors world over, was also because of uncertainty that happened, as I said earlier, with license cancellations, with the arbitrary manner in which, in the context of an alleged scam, that auction was suddenly without any debate. Spectrum was suddenly without any debate auctioned. And that caused a lot of uncertainty in the minds of foreign investors, especially even if there's 100% FDI allowed. I know I've interacted and happen to know some of these investors and some of these large telcos globally. And for them, even now, when I meet them, their concern continues to be, how do we get a guarantee from the country, which means the courts, the executive, that there will be certainty in the sector. Then the fact that there is a lot of debt, whether there will be consolidation or not, whether promoters can sit across the table and thrash out their issues and work out a deal, those, in my opinion, are secondary issues. I think for them, the primary issue is they want a sector which is certain, where they understand that this is based on technology, it's evolving continuously, regulators are playing a catch-up game, but they can't have a regime where, to score political points between party A and party B, we're willing to destroy a sector like telecommunications. That message, I think, is a message that all of us in the political fraternity have to give out as well.
Okay. Milind, that brings me to my final point. As far as what the government needs to do now, yes, the wave of consolidation has happened, but that's as far as what the companies are doing. That's the pricing, the aggression. The fact is that these companies are still not able to fix the basic issues of debt burden. There was an interministerial group on telecom that has been appointed. There were some areas that have been worked upon, but the serious issues as far as pricing is concerned, as far as competitiveness is concerned, as far as the debt burden is concerned, has still not really been looked into. If you had to give a 4 to 5 point agenda on what the government can do to now help the telecom sector to go to the next level, what would that be?
I would say, to be fair, that the government, and I would say consecutive governments, the UPA and NDA, have been, number one, I would say we should not politicize a sector like this, which was unfortunately something that had happened. And the recent 2G verdict pretty much established that the sector had been politicized, that a scam had been essentially manufactured, and that has caused tremendous damage to the sector. And I believe we in India, if we are able to look beyond politics, we have tremendous institutional capacity in our country to nurture the sector. I mean, take an example of net neutrality. We were, early entrants to propagate net neutrality. The TRAI came out with net neutrality guidelines, and India implemented net neutrality even before a data revolution had been unleashed in our country. This is contrary to what happened, for example, in the United States. Not only were we early entrants relative to the rest of the world, but we also demonstrated that successive governments run by different parties will allow net neutrality to stay the course. This is, again, something which is different that happened in the United States. You see a new administration that came in, and again, net neutrality rules had been reversed by FCC. So in that sense, I think we should be proud that we have tremendous institutional capacity in our country, regulatory capacity that can contribute to the health of this sector. I think for us, what we have to do as governments and, as I said, policymakers, is not politicize this sector any further and provide certainty to foreign investors.
Milind, the net neutrality debate is something that I would like to have with you at a later date, but we'll have to wrap up this show. Thank you so much, Milind, for joining in, and thank you for all our panelists who joined in earlier to take us through a quick reaction of what this really means for the sector. So, Arundhati, to sum up for the viewers that are just joining in, Reliance Industries, Reliance Jio, has bought significant assets from Reliance Communication. Several players were vying for it. There was a competitive process that had been run, and 4 specific areas have been sold: the entire 4G network, the entire 4G spectrum, the entire tower business, the entire fiber business, and the entire MCN business.
Absolutely, Kritika. Thank you so much for taking us through that. But with that, it is a wrap on this special broadcast. But up next is 18 on 18, a CNBC TV18 special on the stocks to bet on in 2018.